Hi, thanks for watching Turn to the Stars. My name is Andrea Klim, and I am an astrological counselor and a core shamanic practitioner from the local Manchester area. And today we got a really exciting show planned for you. My guest is Sandra Champlain, and she is here from northern Massachusetts. Welcome, Sandra.
Thank you, Andrea. I'm thrilled to be here.
I'm very thrilled to have you. Sandra is the author of We Don't Die, A Skeptics' Discovery of Life After Death. And she is here to tell us about this incredible book. And, you know, it's really interesting because Sandra was just this weekend with us at our Psychic Holistic Fair, and she did a lecture on her book and book signing, and it was just great. Everybody really enjoyed having you there as well.
I loved being there. Loved it.
It was a great day.
It's the first time I've done something like that, and it was great.
Awesome.
Fun place.
Yeah, it was.
Lots of inspiration.
Yeah.
And love.
Yeah. Yeah, we had a theme of the magic of your beliefs, and there's always a new theme. And so everybody out there who came to the fair, thank you for coming. We so appreciate your support. And so I want to get back to talking with Sandra today because, you know, as you can see on her book, she says it's a skeptic's discovery of life after death. And so why do you call yourself a skeptic?
Well, I call myself a skeptic because I think growing up, I believed what people told me from parents. Of course, religion, grew up Catholic, and we had faith of the afterlife, but there really wasn't any proof. And then in this day and age, there's things like the Long Island Medium and the TV show The Ghost Whisperer and all those kind of shows. But when I grew up, I don't know how old you are, I won't ask, but we didn't have that. And if people claimed to be a medium or psychic, how I grew up, I mean, that was a crazy person not to believe in any of that. So I didn't even question my beliefs. I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that anybody who believed in mediumship or psychic abilities or astrology, crazy. So I wasn't even open at all.
Right. I understand that because I was like that 15 years before today.
Right.
And 15 years ago is when this path began for me. And I was brought up very strict Catholic, going to a Catholic high school. And so I understand. And
another thing is not many people know that we have this little voice in our head. And if we were to stop just for a second and listen, most people would say, hear in their mind, what little voice? Well, that's the little voice. And the little voice comes from our past experiences, how we grew up, what our parents told us was right and wrong. If you were a little kid in school and you knew an answer to a question and you raised your hand and you told the teacher and the teacher says, well, that's not right. Or some kid said, that's stupid. The little voice starts telling you you're stupid or you're not good enough or never raise your hand again. So tied in with the skepticism is we all have this little voice that's saying what's right and wrong. So I ask that you, our viewers, just anyone, know that that little voice is there. It's not always for our best good, what it says, when it says we're not good enough or we can't do it or convinces us we're fearful. So for the case of the interview today, maybe just set that little voice aside. And I clearly had to do it on the road to discovering that life after death is real. But when you can put that little voice aside, it's like a whole new world arises. Right.
Well, it's interesting, you know, I won't go into it too much, but there's actually a couple voices that we have, and I know that you talk about that as well. But you know, the next question though that really comes to mind is, what made you start researching life after death?
It was a fear of dying. It was losing pets, losing my grandfather, having a crummy life, having the same things seem to keep happening to me. Over and over, and heartaches and jobs that didn't work out, and then to have that experience when you look at the stars and you're looking at the vastness of the universe. I think it's easy to ask, who am I? What is my life for? Is there a purpose? What happens next? And that showed up for me as a fear of dying, that I just could not rest unless I found an answer. That is there any proof besides faith? Because like we both grew up Catholic, I needed some hardcore proof that we go on.
Yeah. Well, and what evidence did you find?
The first thing I found is very discreetly, because now remember, I used to think people were crazy that believed in this. I had gone to a lecture with a famous medium. Her name is Doreen Virtue. And I was just part of the audience. There's several hundred people in the audience. And I went for entertainment because I didn't believe in it. My friend did, no problem. And over the course of the hour we were there, Doreen would tell people specifically who their loved ones were around them. And I mean specific. Your grandmother taught you how to knit. Her name was Betsy. She used to make your favorite tomato soup.
Very detailed.
Very detailed. So my skeptical brain was saying, well, these are plants in the audience. Have to be, because it's not real. So anytime there's a plant, there's always some kind of a hard sell that follows. But Andrea, there wasn't any hard sell. There was just messages of love, and then the evening was over. So being the little researcher that I am in the age of the internet, I dig up a little on this Doreen Virtue. And she offered a weekend course in mediumship. And at the end of 3 days, you will be someone who can accurately tell the deceased around others. So the skeptical brain said, there's no way. But the fear of dying, that seeing her do that stage show, that maybe there is something to this, had me very discreetly get an airline ticket and take her course in Laguna Beach, California. And if I can just share the first thing that happened that opened my mind up to this is real, is she told us at the very beginning she was going to give us an example of how we were going to do a medium reading. Now, we weren't really going to do the medium reading. We were just going to play make-believe. Just this is how we do it. So she had us each take a partner, and it was someone I'd never met before. I didn't know anyone in the room. And she had us in chairs like this and sit knee to knee and hold hands and close your eyes. And she said, just imagine that there's this invisible energy that connects heart to heart. And she says, just make up that somewhere, when you have your eyes closed, that there's a person standing behind your partner. And she says, just make it up. Who the person might have been, maybe what they look like, any details, maybe what they died of. There's usually a profound message that comes through. So I was holding this woman's hands, and I said, okay, because I'm making up being a medium now. I see your grandfather, and it's on your mom's side. Now my eyes are closed. I said, his name is Jan. He's a fisherman in Denmark. And because what happened is I got this flash of a fishing boat. I don't know where the word Denmark came in, but I saw that he had a big gap between his two front teeth. He had really windburned skin, blonde hair, blue eyes, died of lung cancer. I saw him with a cigarette. And then there was a message for her mother that he had never said, I love you, while he was alive. And so what came out of my mouth is to share this with your mom. And so I opened my eyes like, okay, it's your turn. And there's just these tears of just running down her face. Her grandfather's name was Jan. He was a fisherman in Denmark. He died of lung cancer, blue eyes, gap between his teeth, and he had never told her mother, I love you. And so that still gives me goosebumps. Camera can't tell. But then she turned to me and she told me about my grandfather. She knew his name was John. She saw him standing with a cane. She saw his big German shepherd named Champa right by his side. And so that opened the door. Was I right all the time? No, I was only right 30 to 40% of the time, and that told me the rest of the time really was my imagination. But I was right enough that it's like, I need to know more. And so, I had to start studying through the psychic world, but also through people that studied near-death experiences, people that studied reincarnation, the doctors, the scientists. There's a ton of people that we've never heard of, most people, that are really big into life after death. And so I wanted to put them all together. And people, you often hear people have to have a near-death experience or be diagnosed with an illness to really start living. I wanted to let people read a few chapters and start living without having to go through one of those experiences.
Well, I had this book. When Sandra sent me her book, I'm on the beach reading this book, and it's a great book. It really is.
Thanks.
And I told her I've never done this before. With her book, the first time, I have jumped from different pages, around. And this morning, I found, if you don't mind, if I opened the book, I said, let me see. I just want to, right here, right now, I'm going to open a page. And I opened this page, and I if you don't mind me reading
Not
this, because it's beautiful. It is chapter 12, Riding the Emotional Roller Coaster. At the end of your life, it's friendships, emotions, and thoughts that you take with you rather than what's in your bank account. So even though people don't have a lot here, they are a lot richer in many ways, and we can learn from that. By Sebastian Vettel, race car driver. And I was just so touched by that. And you're so right, and I find also in your book very interesting the part that when you grieve for a lost or a loved one, that the chemical, the balance is very different in your brain. And
the truth is, Andrea, I was never going to write a book about life after death, because now remember, I used to think people were weird that believed in this. So to put my reputation on the line and stand out and say, this is what I believe, it all happened because my dad died. He died a very painful death due to cancer, and many people don't know what grief is. We expect that it's going to hurt, and we expect that there's going to be depression and sadness and anger. But I went to such a very low place. Not just myself, but I have siblings that I love and adore. And we always hear about families that argue over a death, and I started doing some research, and it's almost 50% of siblings stop talking when a parent dies. Couples that lose a child, have a child die, almost 80% end in divorce. Somebody's diagnosed with a life-threatening illness like cancer, 90% of the marriages end. And so I thought, well, why? And also, what took my family from being loving to now monsters? And I was a monster too. I'm usually this person you see, but we do change. But I wanted to know why. So I started investigating the world of grief, and certainly Elizabeth Kubler-Ross has some really profound stages of grief that are right on. But in addition, I found something, and when the light bulb goes off and it's like, this is it. I found that our brain loses our many chemicals in our brain, serotonin and other neurotransmitters. And a healthy brain has, say, 100% of these chemicals. A grieving brain drops down to about 10%. And why this is important is because serotonin not only controls our mood, so it explains for the anger, the depression, but it also controls our memory, our communication, and our perception centers in our brain. So those of us who have disagreements and arguments, we may be arguing thinking our point is correct, but meanwhile, our brain isn't functioning properly and is not remembering things accurately. I'm hoping this is making sense.
No, it does, because I went through this when I lost my mom in 96. My whole family, everything changed.
Right.
And my brain was doing exactly what you're describing, and I found out through the therapy that I went through that your brain stops talking, the sides of your brain stop talking to each other, and it's very real what you're experiencing.
Oh, it is, and now we're living in our own head, so we think what we're saying is real, but meanwhile the miscommunications take place, and so not only often do we grieve the loss of a loved one who's died, but if there is a family member that's written off, you're grieving a relationship that somebody's still on the planet. So being the good Samaritan that I was, I created a free audio called How to Survive Grief. Just put it online if anybody wants to download it. I posted it. I created a website called survivegrief.com, and people can just press play. And within a few months, 3,000 people in 15 countries had heard it. Now, I didn't advertise it other than a few Facebook posts. So it didn't quite go viral, but it went far. And people started writing me how it eased their pain, how it helped with the communication between family members,
Yeah.
understanding grief.
Yeah.
And the final thing that said, I have to turn this into a book, is people started reporting that they chose not to end their life, to commit suicide, because they realized the deep, dark, depressing place they were feeling was a part of grief, not just from losing a loved one, but if you lose your job, or if your health changes, or if your finances change, grief kicks in. It's and it's like someone who goes through a withdrawal from drug or alcoholism. Your body will go through withdrawal when you lose someone or something important, and it's called grief. Shocking, painful,
traumatic,
and it just turns our life upside down. But when those reports start coming in, it's like, get over your fears, Sandra. You need to put this in a book form. And as miracles happen...
Thank you, Sandra.
Why, thank you. You're welcome. But as miracles happen, I meet a wonderful publisher, and he's someone who helped get Chicken Soup for the Soul off the ground. And he says, if you can write what you're saying, it could impact lots of lives. But Andrea, I don't want to be known as the grief lady, because I'm a life lady. And what you read really was...
Well, this book is very uplifting.
Very motivational.
Yeah, and it's informative. And, like I said, I've jumped around, and I've had so much on my plate that I haven't read every single part of it. But every part, that I've read has been really right on, and it's in line with what I believe as well. So, I'm so glad that you're here. And, it's interesting because there's this question, so many people ask, what is heaven? And I know different people have different pictures or visions of what heaven is, but when I ask you that question, where or what is heaven? How does that?
It's interesting, because I don't know if you have ever had an experience of sleeping at night and you have a dream that is so real, and then you wake up and it's like, oh, that was just a dream. Well, heaven is very much like that. When we close our eyes for the last time here on earth, we open them. You can call it heaven or the hereafter, in a place that's so much more real. The colors, everything is more real than we're experiencing right now. Maybe hard to believe, but it's similar to waking up from a dream and realizing the dream was just a dream. When we are all made up of energy, and just like a log will burn and change forms to fire and then heat, when we die, our energy remains. So whether we call it our soul, our personality, the you that loves to laugh, the you that loves to dream, well, we go on. And I like the term hereafter, because the access for, probably when you do your readings, and even when some of the most brilliant minds in history have created and invented things, it all stems from the quiet mind. And so the quiet mind is where you can go to access, dreams and to communicate with your loved ones. And very often they show up in dreams. But I say the hereafter literally is hereafter, because right now there may be wireless internet in this building. Can we see it? Is it real? Yes. We could be driving down the road, and we have the radio. And it's not connected to anything, but our radio waves real? Can we see them?
We can't see them, no.
And I say heaven is just the place, the hereafter, vibrating in that same invisible place. And that's how we can access so much.
Well, very beautiful, beautiful place to visit. I've been there a couple times and back, and so it's really interesting to hear how very much alike you're describing that. Why did you decide to write this book? Beyond and call it "We Don't Die." What purpose? I know you've talked about a lot of things, but I know there's much more to that.
There is. I know that human beings share 3 fears. The biggest is the fear of dying. There's a fear of failure, and there's a fear of being alone. And much of our life is dealt with fears. I mean, how many dreams have we had that we've not gotten to? How much have we heard that people die with regrets? To live a life knowing that we don't die. Now, I believe we shouldn't choose to die, because there is so much to learn here. I do believe that whether we call it an education for our soul or a remembrance, here is the place where we have our five senses, where we can taste, we can smell, we can hear, all those, we have our eyes and things. So there's much to learn and experience here on earth. We need the lows to experience the highs, and it all happens here. Where we go next might be good all of the time, but that's not where really growth occurs. And to have people live life, myself included, to not, we'll always have the fear. I mean, how often does the voice say in your mind, you can't do that, oh, you shouldn't say this? But to have a new result in your life, to have access to your dreams, it requires doing something new. And most often it is stepping into something that's uncomfortable. The little voice is saying you should be afraid, but that's where you're going to have the new result. So to live knowing that your deceased loved ones are around. Now, they're not haunting you. When people say, are they with me when I shower? No, not necessarily. But in times, I believe there's more education to be done when we cross over. But to live life knowing that when you need them, you have an army. It is funny, isn't it? You have an army of people on your side. We can never fail. Because it's all an education. And we're never alone, and we don't die. So to live now, there's a woman. There's a few things. There's a woman, somebody nicknamed my book A Handbook for Being Human, because you can find yourself wherever you're at in life, whether you believe in life after death, where you're looking for information on grief. A man I know owns a car dealership, bought the book just to support me, thought it'd be a nice thing to do. Well, now he's bought 3 cases. He gives them to his customers because it's so motivational. It gets people in the driver's seat of their life, driving towards their dreams. So to have someone who is a woman who had lost her husband, they were married, I think 46 years. She locked herself in the house for 5 months. Because it is so easy to stop our lives when we lose someone.
It is.
Well, now she's out country line dancing and out with her friends, and so to put her back in the driver's seat and live her life. So to answer your question, I wrote We Don't Die to give people permission to play full out and get their money's worth out of this life. Even though there's fear, even though there's other people that might cause us stress, it's to have some of the results that you want, and that love and friendships and passion now. With no regrets.
Present. That's huge.
It is huge.
That is very, very huge. And, so I'm really glad that, that you wrote this. And for everybody that's out there watching, hoping that you'll, check out WeDon'tDie.com, or even Sandra
Champlain.com.
I always think of Sandra. That's how I remember your website, SandraChamplain.com. And it's funny because you talked about fears, and I've never had that fear of dying, never, ever. And I'm not scared of spirits being around. I think it's awesome. This is great. But I've come to understand even more, that we are a spirit, we're a soul, a mind, and a body. And the body is just a form. It's the form we can see, like you're talking about. So there's a lot of little things, and it's kind of, you're a great writer as well, because sometimes you pick up a book and you can sometimes get lost, this type of book, but not in your book. It's
so funny because when it came time to write the book, I've read so many crummy books myself. And I thought, there must be a certain way to write. And then I read, and I thought, when I've read so many awful books, and there's lots of good books, I said, here's the secret for everybody. I wrote this book for me. If I could have something that would keep me empowered, I have some brilliant quotes in there that I've borrowed from other people. And it is a book that you can open the back first, or you can turn to any random page and get some motivation for your life. But I wrote it for me, and so I have pictured a person sitting across from me, and this is the best way I knew how to do it, Andrea, is I just decided to tell them the story. And then I was typing it and I pictured somebody in front of me, and then I kept, telling the story. And so there's no big words, because I don't use big words. And Yeah. And it's
Well,
just
normally, I'll tell you, Sandra, when I pick up a book and if there's big words in there that are confusing me and I have to go look them up, I get bored very quickly.
Exactly.
Because I want, I want content, I want a story, I want to be amused, I want to be entertained. But when you read your book, you can feel it's written from the heart. And I felt that. I mean, at some parts I had tears coming out of my eyes, because I've had very similar experience. But you write it, it's written from the heart. So that's why I like your book very, very much.
Thanks.
And for anybody that, if, this is available through your website, where?
It's available through my website, wedon'tdie.com, if you want a autographed copy. Also, you can go to your local Barnes & Nobles if you're an Amazon shopper there, or your local bookstore.
Oh, great. So it's easy.
It's easy. Or Kindle or Nook if you want it fast.
Well, yeah, that's one of my clients. I was telling her about your book, and she got it on Kindle just
Fast.
like that.
I do the same thing all the time when I hear something I've got to have.
Yeah, well, if it sparks an interest, and not only that, I think it's a great tool. There's so many people that they live in the traditional world, they walk the traditional path, and when life changes, it's confusing. And you're looking for ways to understand that, So that was why I started 15 years ago on the path I'm on. So I do thank you very much
You're
for
welcome.
taking, it takes a lot of courage also to, when you're a skeptic, to say, what are people going to think? But you know what?
I tell you, there's so much freedom stepping into my fears. And does everybody agree with me? No. How many people challenge me and say, prove it? It's like, well, read the first couple chapters, then let's have this conversation. And Albert Einstein once said, we can look at life as nothing is a miracle or everything's a miracle. And so whether you believe or you don't believe, at one time this planet was just this rock with water and grass and earth and trees and whatever. And somehow there's a microphone in front of us. We have wireless internet, the Kindle you mentioned, these screens. When we start realizing it is a miraculous world. And when you can put aside the little voice in their head and live from the miracle it is, suddenly your life can change and be better and fuller and
I have to
satisfied.
tell you a little story this morning. I take my daughter to school very early. She's a sophomore at Pinkerton Academy, and then I take my little Jack Russell on a walk because that's my spirit food in the morning.
Sweet.
Early at the park, and she was chasing a groundhog this morning. But then I came home. We had all these smiley balloons from the fair. So I says, you know what? Happy day, oh happy day, and we put these balloons out along the fence. You saw them when you came. So, you do, these little things matter.
Little things. And then also, if you're having a crummy day, take a piece of paper, start writing out 50 things you're grateful for. And your little voice may not want you to do this, but it'll turn your day into realizing what you do have.
Suddenly there'll be light where there wasn't light. And my husband always says this, where there's light, no darkness can stay. So anyway, everyone, thank you for watching Turn to the Stars. Thank you, Sandra, for being here. I'm very grateful for you coming. And everyone, thank you for all your support, and take good care. We'll see you next week.